Alright, today we are going to be reviewing The Librarians Season 4. What to say about this? I liked it a lot. It was a good series. It was really good. It brought back a bad guy that was actually a good guy the first time we saw her in the first movie. I've been a big fan of The Librarians since it was a movie series. Back in the day, I discovered it in 2010. I think it was. I was looking up the filmography for the girl from Castle, Satana Katic or something like that, and I was just like, oh, cool, she was in this, and so I go on my torrent site and I downloaded it and the only thing that was available wasn't the third one that she was in, but it was a 3-part set, and I'm like, well, why not? Let's watch all 3 then. So I downloaded the first one. It was called The Librarian, The Quest for the Spear. It followed a bookworm nerd, Flynn Carson, played by Noah Weil, and he had 20 degrees, and he was just kept on educating himself, and never had done anything practical. But he was very smart, and so he decides, after a date gone wrong, to get a job, because he'd also been kicked out of school right then for something. I forgot what. No, he'd been kicked out because somebody decided that he didn't have practical knowledge. The teacher, who actually ended up being one of the bad guys in that movie, had decided that, and so he's out there, and he's sitting in his room, and all of a sudden he gets this envelope, and it was a mysterious thing. It mysteriously appears. I definitely recommend you go watch the movie. So you go in, and he's got this interview with Charlene, played by Jane Curtin, and she did a very good job in this movie as well. She was in the next 2 movies, as well as at least part of Season 1 of The Librarians, and part of Season 3 as well. After he gets the job, we meet Bob Newhart, who played Judson, who was theoretically the first librarian for over 2,000 years, but we don't find that out until the 3rd movie, which is impressive, and we don't get it actually confirmed until Season 1 of The Librarians. But I am getting ahead of myself. So, he gets on the plane. He's supposed to solve the language of the birds, which no one has ever solved. No one knows what it is. And he's on the plane, he's working on it. Anyways, this hot girl sits next to him. And Judson had told him right before he gets on the plane that he's to trust no one. Anyway, so he's solving it. He solves the language of the birds during the plane flight, and he goes out and he's bragging about it, and then he starts hitting on the girl next to him, and she's like, I am not even remotely in your class. And it just keeps going downhill from there. Because I believe the Scorpion Brotherhood, I want to say it's the Scorpion Brotherhood, had stolen, or the Serpent Brotherhood, someone had stolen something. Or someone had stolen the Spear of Destiny. I don't have all that right in front of me right now. I've got a couple of names, and that's about it to keep me on point-ish. And so they'd stolen it, and they'd stolen a third of the Spear of Destiny, and then the thing is, hey, let's get the rest of the Spears of Death. Let's get the rest of the pieces from the various places where they're hidden around the world. So that's the plot, and they've got to go through all these obstacles in which Flynn's brilliance and flamboyance, quite frankly, helps. And that girl who sat next to him was actually his guardian, or the library's guardian, as we find out in Season 2 of The Librarians, this TV show. It was actually supposed to be the Librarian's guardian, because they have a new one. Anyway, they fix it all up, and the guy who had ended up kicking him out of school had been another one of the bad guys, along with the previous librarian who had faked his own death. So, Librarians 2. I'm watching this at about 2 a.m. the first time, because I watched the first one at midnight. I didn't have to go to work till 4 p.m. the next day. Why not? So, Librarians 2, Return to King Solomon's Mines. This time it had Gabriel Anwar as just another archaeologist. No idea what happened to Nicole Noon, who was the guardian, and from the first movie. It apparently it didn't work out. They go to that in The Librarians 3, he's like, oh, it didn't work out with Nicole, it didn't work out with Emily, and then he's just like, okay. But in Librarians 2, Return to King Solomon's Mines, he's going with an archaeologist and following in the footsteps of, quite frankly, his own father, for some reason, an uncle of his, to find King Solomon's Mines, and it's impressive, the things that he, and just the way he solves it, just flamboyance, and he had a lot of personality. Same actor, and it was really good. This one, notably, was directed by Jonathan Frakes, Will Riker, and he also directed The Librarians 3, which I'm about to get to. But they find King Solomon's Mines, long story short, and they have a love affair, I think. I don't remember. I had this rule about trilogies where the second movie wasn't ever as good. These were all these were all television movies too, if I remember correctly, when I was doing some brief research on them that night. Librarians 3, Curse for the Judas Chalice. This is the one that I'd gone to see. This one started putting in some more fantastical elements. This one involved actual vampires, and good vampires, bad vampires, cheesy lines, stuff like that. It was all a kind of a cheesy set of movies, but it was designed like that. I know they came out in 2004, 2006, and 2008, respectively, and they didn't really have a budget because they were made for TV, and honestly, they kind of seemed like Indiana Jones spin-offs, but they were really good. I liked the plots. Okay, if you ignore the bad CGI, if you ignore all the other stuff, the plot itself was usually pretty doggone good, and the way it solved it was brilliant. I can't speak to how accurate it would have been for anything, but I know it was a fairly accurate way of solving it. This one starred as the love interest. I can't pronounce her name, but it's the girl from Castle. She played Beckett, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section if anybody actually watches these videos. But she played the main actress on Castle, that Castle based Nikki Heat off of. I can't remember her name right now. I can't pronounce it, even though it's right there, right in front of me. I've got the same memory palace, kind of. I just can't pronounce things. Also, I don't think I've ever actually heard it pronounced out loud. But no, that she was a vampire trying to protect other people from the actual original Dracula, and it said that only a branch from an aspen tree could kill her as a stake, or the sun. So that was interesting, and it was a very well done movie. It was, like I said, very well done, very well scripted. Just the plots, it kind of became cliche after a while, except at the end, the main love interest decided to step out into the sun and die, which I thought was a very sad ending, and I thought, that's okay, it's in a good way, but he got back his moxie, because he had a freak out at the beginning of that movie about how his love life always keeps getting interfered with by the library. And it was interesting, and they go through a whole bunch. You're gonna have to watch these movies. You really are. They're really good. You're just gonna have to watch them. Pay no attention to the CGI and the bad CGI. But they're decent movies, and also directed by Jonathan Frakes. And so that was how it was ended. And I was good with that, and it was now 4 a.m. that first time I saw it, and I was like, oh, that was sad. I need to go to sleep because I need to go to work in the evening. So I went to sleep, and I'd loved the movies. I think I saw them 2 more times while I was out there. And then I moved, and I'd kind of moved on with my life, and I'd forgotten about it. And then all of a sudden on TNT one day, I see an advertisement. I'm not paying that much attention to it, and I noticed it starred one of the guys from the TV show Leverage, because I'd been watching that about that time, and actually he was the guy who said Librarians, and I'm like, huh, so they made a TV show out of it. And I thought, okay, they'll probably start over and do something else, and no, actually it's the same library, the same librarians. It had the original Judson, the original Charlene, even Flynn. played by Noah Wiley, I'm not sure if I mentioned that, was in there. And it centered around them. Actually, it centered around Eve Baird, Ezekiel, who is the new guardian of the librarians, or of the library, to be more specific, Ezekiel Jones, Cassandra Killian, and Jacob Stone. And they battled the Serpent Brotherhood, who are trying to bring magic back into the world. And eventually they do end up bringing magic back into the world, so technically I guess the librarians lost that battle, but they win the big battle in the actual series against them, because they brought magic back to do something very specific. And they also the library has another curator and an annex named, they just had this problem on the very last episode. It wasn't Judson Jenkins, and he was played by, oh good lord, he's played by the guy from Night Court, John LaRouche, I want to say it was his name. He was the lawyer on Night Court. And he's basically the go-to Judson, because I'm guessing Bob Newhart was just too old now. And so Season 1, they battled the Serpent Brotherhood. Season 2 had a bit of a twist, and they're battling Prospero from the play The Tempest, which on William Shakespeare, and it turns out Prospero was William Shakespeare, and he wove himself such a tale that he had become Prospero in The Tempest, and he had lived all this time, just gathering power because of his Prospero persona. Season 3, they're fighting Apep, the Egyptian god, sometimes called Anubis, but not in this particular series. He was the Egyptian god of chaos, and it went through a lot of similar themes, and it was really good as well. I definitely recommend you see all of these. Season 4, there wasn't really an overarching enemy. I take that back. There kind of was, but we weren't sure if she was an enemy or not. So, remember I mentioned we didn't know what happened to Nicole. So at the very end of the Quest for the Spear, Flynn's telling his mom that he's actually got kind of a love life now, and all of a sudden Nicole shows up on a motorcycle and burns and does a burnout basically in the middle of this street cafe, and Flynn gets on the back of the motorcycle and they're saying, oh, they've got H.G. Wells's time machine was stolen by time-traveling ninjas and we're going to have to battle it. And so they actually redid that for another actress, kind of like they redid the last scene of Back to the Future 1 and Back to the Future 2 with a new actress. They redid that scene and showed what happened to Nicole. She ended up, because the time machine exploded, and she ended up going back 500 years, and she became immortal, and then we weren't sure if she was against the library or for the library, and I'm not going to spoil that for you. But it's very, you got to see it. I'm running out of time on this, but it's a very good series, and you learn to and you start questioning the library. So, anyway, remember, life's tough. It's even tougher if you don't know how to get where you're going.